They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I served mine with a side of federal indictments. The champagne bubbles were still fizzing in my glass when Drake Wilson walked into conference room A and destroyed everything I'd worked for. I should have seen it coming. Looking back now, the warning signs were there all along, written in the dismissive emails, the stolen ideas presented as his own, the way he'd smile, that shark smile whenever I mentioned a breakthrough with a client. But on that particular Thursday evening, with the city lights glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows and my colleagues clapping me on the back, I was too drunk on success to notice the predator circling. I had just closed the winter deal, $500 million. Philip Winters himself had shaken my hand that afternoon, his weathered fingers surprisingly strong as he looked me in the eye and said I reminded him of his daughter. 6 months of 18-hour days, of learning everything about precision manufacturing and supply chain logistics, of building trust with a 70-year-old man who'd spent his entire life perfecting his craft. 6 months of my life poured into spreadsheets and site visits and late-night calls where Philip would test my knowledge, making sure I actually understood his business rather than just trying to sell him something. The deal was mine. Everyone knew it. Everyone except Drake. He slammed the conference room door so hard the champagne flutes rattled on the table. The celebration died like someone had cut the power. 20 voices fell silent as Drake strode across the room, his platinum cufflinks catching the light, his expression dark enough to curdle milk. I lowered my glass slowly, setting it on the mahogany table with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. My heart was already racing, some primal part of my brain recognizing danger even before my conscious mind caught up. Drake stopped 3 feet from me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and aggressive. He didn't look at anyone else in the room. His eyes were locked on mine, and what I saw there made my stomach drop. $100,000? He said, his voice low and rough. That's my cut for bringing you into this deal. I blinked. For a moment, I genuinely didn't understand what he was saying. The words made no sense, like he'd suddenly started speaking another language. Around us, my colleagues shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. No one moved. I'm sorry? I heard my own voice, thin and confused. What did you just say? Drake's jaw tightened. He reached up and adjusted his cufflinks, a deliberate, controlled movement that somehow felt threatening. Don't play dumb, Riley. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I brought you into this opportunity. Without me, you never would have met Philip Winters. So here's how this works. You're going to give me $100,000. My share of your commission. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles going white. You were in one preliminary meeting. You left after 40 minutes to play golf. Is that what you think this business is about? Drake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Meetings? Paperwork? This industry runs on relationships. Sweetheart, my relationships. I've known the Winters family for 15 years. I'm the one who made the introduction. That makes this my deal, and you're just the worker bee who executed it. Something hot and sharp flared in my chest. I built the relationship with Philip. I spent 6 months earning his trust. I negotiated every single term in that contract. And you did a decent job, Drake said, like he was praising a particularly clever dog. But let's be clear about the hierarchy here. You work for me. I brought you the opportunity, you closed it, and now you pay me my percentage. That's how it works at this level. I looked past him at the other people in the room, my colleagues, my team. They were all staring at their shoes, at the walls, anywhere but at me. No one was going to help. No one was going to say this was insane, that Drake was completely out of line. They were going to stand there and let this happen because Drake was senior management and I was just a 31-year-old senior consultant who'd gotten too big for her britches. No, I said quietly. Drake's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something cold and calculating. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not giving you money for work you didn't do. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he smiled, and it was worse than the anger. You know, I tried to do this the easy way, give you a chance to be smart about it. But you want to be difficult. He pulled out his phone, made a show of checking the time. $20,000. That's the first installment. You'll wire it to my account by end of business Friday. That's tomorrow, I said stupidly. Then I guess you better get moving. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. The rest can come out of your quarterly bonus. Should be easy enough. And before you get any ideas about running to HR, remember who I play golf with every Sunday. Remember who was my college roommate. Remember what happened to Emma Chen when she tried to make noise about her performance review. Remember what happened to Liv Martinez when she complained about budget allocations. My blood turned to ice. Emma had been fired 3 months ago for performance issues that materialized out of nowhere. Liv had quit suddenly, and when I'd asked her why, at her going-away drinks, she'd just shaken her head and said this place wasn't what she thought it was. You can't do this, I whispered. I already am. $20,000 by Friday. Or I go to Alan and Jerry and tell them you've been making unauthorized promises to the Winter account, that you manipulated the financial projections to make the deal look better than it is, that you've been conducting personal business on company time. He straightened up, brushing invisible lint off his jacket. Who do you think they'll believe? You, or the guy who's been bringing in 8-figure accounts for the last decade? My mouth was dry, my hands were shaking. I thought about my bank account, nearly empty after paying for my sister's medical bills. I thought about the commission check that was supposed to arrive next month, the money I desperately needed. I thought about 3 years of 80-hour weeks, of sacrificing my personal life, my health, my relationships, all for a career that was supposed to mean something. I need time to think, I managed. Drake checked his phone again, dismissive. Don't think too long. Oh, and Riley? I need you to prep the full Winter account deck by 7 a.m. tomorrow. I'm presenting to their executive team at 9. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. He was going to present my work, stand in front of Philip Winters and the people I'd spent 6 months building relationships with, and take credit for everything I'd done. And there wasn't a damn thing I could say about it without risking everything. The deck is already done, I said through numb lips. Great, send it over tonight. I'll want to review it and make any necessary changes. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Riley? Welcome to the big leagues. The door closed behind him with a soft click. For a moment, no one in the conference room moved. Then, slowly, the conversations resumed. Quieter now, uncomfortable. Within 5 minutes, everyone had found a reason to leave. They drifted out in 2s and 3s, not meeting my eyes, until I was alone with half-empty champagne flutes and the crushing weight of my own naivety. I sat down slowly, staring at the city lights beyond the window. I'd worked so hard, sacrificed so much. And in 30 seconds, Drake had taken it all and made it clear he could destroy me if I fought back. The unfairness of it was choking me. The rage was a living thing in my chest, but it had nowhere to go. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I knew it was Drake before I even looked. I didn't answer. Let it ring. Let him wonder. I picked up my heels from under the table where I'd kicked them off during the celebration and walked barefoot to the elevator. The marble floor was cold under my feet. My reflection in the elevator doors looked like a stranger. Pale, shocked, defeated. No, not defeated. Not yet. Later, in my apartment with its secondhand furniture and persistent leak in the bathroom ceiling, I sat on my worn couch and stared at the dark screen of my laptop. The TV murmured from the apartment next door. Someone was watching a cooking show. The normalcy of it felt surreal. My phone kept buzzing. Drake, probably. Or maybe it was someone from the office, calling to offer hollow sympathy while carefully avoiding any real support. I turned the phone face down and didn't look. 3 options played out in my mind, like possible futures, each one worse than the last. I could pay Drake, drain what little savings I had, go into debt, and spend the next year working off a quarterly bonus that was supposed to be mine. Watch my sister's medical bills pile up because I couldn't help anymore. Except that this was just how the world worked. I could refuse, stand my ground, and watch Drake systematically destroy my career. He'd proven he could do it. Emma and Liv were proof that HR wouldn't help, that Alan Hayes would side with his golf buddy over a consultant who'd gotten too big for her britches. I'd be fired within a month, blacklisted in the industry, and starting over at 31 with a gap in my resume I couldn't explain. I could report it, go to HR with my story and hope they'd listen. But Drake had been right about one thing. It was my word against his. He was senior management with 15 years of rainmaking behind him. I was nobody. And even if they investigated, even if they found some shred of evidence, the best I could hope for was a quiet settlement and a non-disclosure agreement that would silence me forever. All 3 paths led to the same place. Me, broken and silent and complicit in my own exploitation. Unless... The thought came slowly, dangerous and desperate. What if there was a 4th option? What if I didn't have to choose between destruction and submission? What if I could fight back in a way Drake wouldn't expect? If I was going down, I wouldn't go down alone. The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. I stood up, ignoring the shoes I dropped by the door, and went to my laptop. My hands were steady as I opened it, pulling up my work files. 6 months of emails, meeting notes, financial projections, contract negotiations. Every single interaction I'd had with the Winter account, meticulously documented because that's what good consultants do. I started reading, and as I read, a pattern emerged. Drake's name appeared exactly 4 times in 6 months of documentation. The initial introduction email, a calendar invitation to the first meeting, which he'd left early, a forwarded email where he'd added nothing but, for your information, to a thread I was already on, and 1 expense report for a lunch with Philip Winters that I knew for a fact had never happened because I'd been having coffee with Philip that day, listening to him talk about his granddaughter's college applications. A fake expense report. That was interesting. I dug deeper, pulling up other accounts Drake had been involved with: the Morton deal, the Bellwether acquisition, the Jensen portfolio. I'd worked on pieces of all of them, always in a support role, always watching Drake swoop in at the end to take the glory. But now, looking at the actual documentation with fresh eyes, I started to see things I'd missed before. Expense reports that didn't match calendar invitations. Client meetings that seemed to happen at the same time. Drake was definitely somewhere else. Budget allocations that made no sense. And underneath it all, a pattern of young consultants, mostly women, who'd done the actual work while Drake collected the credit and the commission. I worked through the night, barely noticing when the sky outside my window started to lighten. I pulled financial reports, cross-referenced dates, documented inconsistencies, built a timeline, connected dots, and with each piece of evidence I found, my resolve hardened. By 5 a.m., I had something. Not enough to guarantee anything, but enough to make a case, enough to fight back. I showered quickly, put on my best suit, the one I'd been saving for important client meetings, applied makeup to hide the exhaustion and the fear, looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked dangerous. Good. I got to the office before sunrise, while the building was still mostly empty. Security waved me through with a nod. The cleaning crew was finishing up the executive floor, their vacuum cleaners humming. I went to my desk and started printing. Evidence, documentation. Everything I'd compiled in my sleepless night of research. The sun was just starting to paint the sky pink when Drake arrived, impeccable as always in his charcoal suit. He walked past my desk without acknowledging me, then paused and turned back. "The winter deck," he said loudly, making sure the early arrivals in nearby cubicles could hear. "It needs some revisions before my presentation. I need you to make these changes before 9 a.m. He dropped a folder on my desk, heavy, deliberate, a power play for our audience. Then he leaned down, voice dropping. "Account details are on a sticky note inside. Don't disappoint me, Riley." I nodded, not trusting my voice, watched him walk away toward his office, supremely confident in his control of the situation. He had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and composed an email. To Drake Wilson. Subject: Winter account, urgent discussion. Need to discuss critical information regarding the handoff. Conference room C at 3 p.m. Important details about the transition. I hit send and waited. His reply came 2 minutes later. Tied up in external meetings. Pushed to 5 p.m. Perfect. Most people would be gone by then. Fewer witnesses to what was about to happen. I spent the day in a strange state of hyper-focus. Completed my normal work. Responded to emails. Had lunch with colleagues who asked careful questions about last night that I deflected with practiced ease. All the while, the folder of evidence sat in my bag like a bomb waiting to detonate. At 4:55, I was already in conference room C. I'd chosen it deliberately. Smaller than A, more intimate but still professional. Glass walls that showed we were meeting but didn't broadcast what we were saying. I sat with my back straight, the folder closed in front of me, and watched the clock tick toward 5. Drake arrived exactly on time, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. He didn't sit down. "This better be important," he said. "I have dinner plans." "I think you'll want to hear this." I pushed the folder across the table. "Take a look." He stared at it like it might bite him. "What is this?" "Just open it." Irritation flickered across his face, but he sat down and flipped open the folder. I watched his expression change as he scanned the first page. Confusion, then annoyance. Then something harder to read. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, voice rising. "A record," I said calmly. "Every instance of client funds being mishandled under your supervision, every falsified expense report, every time you claimed credit for work you didn't do." He slammed the folder shut. "You think anyone will believe you over me? This is your word against mine." I pulled out my phone, tapped the recording app, found the file labeled Conference Room A, Thursday 7:47 p.m. and hit play. Drake's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. $100,000, that's my cut for bringing you into this deal. I let it play for 10 seconds, then paused it. I have the whole conversation, every threat, every demand, every word. The blood drained from Drake's face, then red rushed back in, fury replacing shock. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. "You recorded me without my consent. That's illegal in this state. You just destroyed your own case." I smiled. Actually smiled. "You're wrong. For certain financial crimes, one-party consent laws don't apply." I checked, very carefully, with an actual lawyer. "I'll have you fired," he snarled, jabbing a finger at my face. "Effective immediately. You can clean out your desk now." The conference room door opened. Eleanor Vasquez stood in the doorway, immaculate in a navy suit, her silver hair pulled back in her signature chignon. Our general counsel. The most terrifying woman in the building. The kind of lawyer who made senior partners nervous. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Wilson." Her voice was calm, neutral, giving nothing away. I hope I'm not interrupting. Drake's finger dropped. Eleanor, this isn't a good time. Isn't it? She stepped inside and closed the door. Because I received a rather concerning email from Miss Bennett about an hour ago. Something about financial irregularities that require immediate attention. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was my insurance policy. The Hail Mary I'd thrown an hour ago. An email to Eleanor, laying out just enough to make her look, while holding back the most damaging evidence for this moment. Riley is making baseless accusations to cover her own incompetence, Drake said quickly. I was just informing her that her employment is terminated. Eleanor's gaze shifted to him. On what grounds? Poor performance, insubordination, unauthorized access to confidential files. Interesting. Eleanor moved to the table, gestured at the folder. May I? Drake hesitated, then shrugged. It's nonsense. Riley cobbled together some out-of-context emails to deflect from her own failures. Eleanor opened the folder and began to read. The silence stretched. I didn't dare look at Drake, didn't dare breathe too loudly. Everything hinged on this moment. On whether Eleanor saw what I saw in those documents. Finally, she looked up. Miss Bennett, how did you obtain these records? The question I'd been dreading. Some came through normal channels, access I already had. The rest I documented from my own files and notes over several months. She hacked into restricted systems, Drake interrupted, accessed files above her clearance level. Did you? Eleanor asked me directly. No, I never accessed anything I wasn't authorized to see. I just connected information that was already available to me. Eleanor nodded slowly. Mr. Wilson, several of these expense reports are concerning. The lunch with Philip Winters on March 15th, for example. What about it? Drake's voice was sharp. According to Miss Bennett's notes, she was having coffee with Mr. Winters that afternoon. At the same time, you claimed to have taken him to lunch at a restaurant 40 miles away. Riley's notes could be wrong. They could be, Eleanor agreed, which is why we'll need to verify, along with these other discrepancies. She closed the folder. Company policy requires we investigate all allegations of financial misconduct, regardless of source. I think we should all sit down and discuss this properly. This is ridiculous, Drake said, but there was a crack in his armor now, a hint of uncertainty. I have the winter presentation in the morning. I don't have time for this. Actually, Eleanor said, her voice still perfectly calm, the presentation has been postponed, at my request. Drake went very still. You don't have the authority to do that. I do when there are concerns about potential securities violations. Riley, why don't you walk us through what you've found? Start with the Jensen account. For the next 2 hours, I laid it out. Every irregularity, every falsified report, every instance of Drake claiming credit for someone else's work. Drake interrupted constantly, his voice getting louder, more aggressive, more desperate as the evidence piled up. Eleanor remained unreadable, asking pointed questions, taking notes. When I got to the recording, Drake tried one more time to discredit it, bringing up consent laws. Eleanor shut him down with a single sentence about the legal framework for financial crimes that made it clear she'd already researched this angle. Halfway through, there was a knock on the door. Jerry Kimball, our CFO, stepped inside, lean and sharp-eyed, with a reputation for being absolutely ruthless about numbers. Eleanor briefed him in 30 seconds. Jerry listened, then turned to Drake. Can you explain the irregularities in the Jensen account? This is absurd, Drake said, standing up. I've brought millions of dollars to this firm. I don't deserve to be ambushed by baseless accusations from a disgruntled employee. Millions of dollars that we're now going to have to verify were actually yours to claim, Jerry said mildly. Sit down, Drake. I'm calling Alan. Drake pulled out his phone. He needs to know what's happening. He's already aware, Jerry said. In fact, he's waiting for my call. Drake froze. What? Did you really think we didn't notice? Jerry's voice was cold now. Accounting flagged unusual patterns months ago. We've been quietly reviewing transactions all quarter. The world tilted. They'd known. All along, they'd known something was wrong, and they'd been building their own case. My evidence wasn't revealing new information. It was confirming suspicions they already had. Your system access has been temporarily suspended, Eleanor said, pending the outcome of our investigation. Drake looked at me, and the hatred in his eyes was pure and terrible. You'll regret this, Riley. Then he left, slamming the door so hard the glass walls shook. Eleanor and Jerry stayed for another hour, asking questions, taking copies of my evidence, explaining what would happen next. Internal investigation, possible external audit. I might need to provide testimony. Keep quiet about the details. Don't discuss with colleagues. When they finally left, I sat alone in the conference room as the sun set over the city. I'd done it. I'd actually fought back, but I had no idea if I'd won or just signed my own termination papers. The next few weeks were surreal. Drake was absent, officially on administrative leave pending review. Rumors flew through the office like wildfire. People who'd ignored me at the champagne celebration suddenly wanted to grab coffee, fish for information. I smiled and said nothing. I threw myself into my work, managing the winter transition with meticulous care. Philip called me directly twice to ask where Drake was. I deflected smoothly, professionally. Eleanor had coached me on exactly what to say. Then the messages started. Unknown numbers. Texts that walked right up to the line of explicit threats without quite crossing it. You should have taken the deal. Careers end in many ways, some more painful than others. I forwarded them to Eleanor. She added them to the file with barely a reaction, like this was exactly what she'd expected. On Friday of the third week, I got an email from HR. Request for meeting, Monday morning. My stomach dropped. This was it. They decided I was more trouble than I was worth. Easier to quietly get rid of me than deal with the mess I'd created. I spent the weekend preparing to be unemployed. Updated my resume. Reached out to my network. Tried not to panic about my empty bank account and my sister's next round of medical bills. Monday morning, I walked into the HR conference room to find more people than I'd expected. Alan Hayes, the CEO, sitting at the head of the table with his politician's smile. Jerry, Eleanor. Two people from HR I didn't recognize. Riley. Alan gestured to the empty chair. Thank you for joining us. Please, sit. I sat, hands folded in my lap to hide their shaking. We've completed our preliminary investigation, Jerry said. The findings are concerning. Multiple irregularities that can't be explained by administrative error. Eleanor picked up the thread. Drake maintains these were authorized transactions, but we can't find documentation supporting that claim. Alan leaned forward, his expression grave. This puts us in a difficult position. Drake has suggested a resolution that would allow him to resign quietly, in exchange for certain considerations. What kind of considerations? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Assurances that no legal action will be pursued, and he's requested that you sign a non-disclosure agreement. A gag order, I said flatly. Alan winced. We prefer to think of it as compensation for your discretion and continued loyalty to the firm. And if I refuse? The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Alan's smile tightened. That would be unfortunate. While we appreciate you bringing these issues to light, the methods you use to gather information are problematic. Accessing restricted financial records, recording conversations without consent. I never accessed anything I wasn't authorized to see, I cut in. I only compiled information that was already available to me. A matter of interpretation that lawyers could debate endlessly, Jerry sighed. Messy for everyone involved. So Drake gets to walk away with a good reference and his reputation intact? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. After years of stealing credit, after extorting me, after threatening my career? He's losing his position, the HR director said. That's a significant consequence. Only to land at another firm with glowing recommendations, I'm guessing. Alan shifted uncomfortably. Riley, I understand your frustration, but the business reality is complex. The winter account is extremely valuable to us. Public scandal could jeopardize that relationship. I need time to consider my options, I said. Of course. Take the weekend. We'll reconvene Monday morning. I left the building feeling like I'd been hollowed out. Was this it? The best I could hope for? Drake getting away with everything while I signed away my right to ever speak about it? The following evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it, debating, then answered. Riley Bennett? A woman's voice, cautious. Yes. Who is this? My name is Zoe Chen. I used to work with Drake Wilson, 3 years ago. My heart started pounding. How did you get my number? LinkedIn. Professional networks. It doesn't matter. She paused. What matters is that I know what he did to you, and I know you're fighting back. I can't discuss ongoing investigations, I said carefully. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking if you want to hear about what he did to me. We met at a coffee shop 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of anonymous chain restaurant where no one would recognize us. Zoe was younger than I'd expected, maybe 28, with tired eyes and a careful way of speaking, like someone who'd learned to measure every word. She told me her story over bad coffee and worse pastries, how she'd brought Drake a major client, how he'd demanded a percentage of her commission, how she'd refused and found herself suddenly under investigation for ethical violations that materialized from nowhere, how she'd been fired, blacklisted, spent 2 years working retail before finally clawing her way back into a lesser position at a smaller firm. I should have fought harder, she said, but I was 25 and scared and I didn't know what I was doing. You're not the only one, I said quietly. Zoe smiled without humor. I know. That's why I'm here. She'd brought 2 other women, Emma Chen, who I'd known before her sudden departure, and Liv Martinez, who'd quit rather than be destroyed. They showed up an hour into my conversation with Zoe, and we commandeered a corner booth and ordered more coffee we didn't drink. The stories were horrifyingly similar. Drake targeted successful young professionals, usually women, who brought in major clients. He'd claim credit, demand payment, and if they refused, he'd systematically destroy them. HR complaints went nowhere. His relationship with Alan Hayes protected him. And so it continued, year after year, with Drake getting richer and more powerful, while his victims scattered to the winds. How many? I asked. How many people has he done this to? That we know of? Zoe pulled out a tablet. 7, but there could be more who haven't come forward. We worked through the night, compiling stories, matching dates and details, building a comprehensive picture of Drake's pattern of abuse. By sunrise, we had something devastating. Not just isolated incidents, but systematic predatory behavior spanning 5 years across multiple firms. I looked at the stack of evidence, exponentially larger than what I'd compiled alone, and felt something shift. I wasn't fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for all of us. Monday morning, I walked into that conference room with my own folder. Much thicker than last time. Alan started with his politician's smile. Riley, we're hoping you've had time to consider our proposal. I have, I said, setting the folder on the table. But first, I'd like to share some additional information I've received. The smile faltered. We've conducted a thorough investigation. Additional allegations would require substantial verification. Then verify them. I opened the folder. 7 former employees, all with similar stories about Drake Wilson, all with documentation, dates, emails, witness statements. Eleanor reached for the folder. Alan tried to stop her, but she was already reading, her expression growing more severe with each page. Some of these people no longer work here, Jerry said. Their complaints aren't our responsibility. Actually, establishing a pattern of behavior is extremely relevant, Eleanor said, still reading, particularly if some of these incidents occurred while they were employees and were mishandled by our HR department. Alan's face was reddening. Riley, you've put this company in an impossible position. Drake did that. I'm just refusing to be his latest victim. The door opened. I turned, expecting security, and instead saw Philip Winters. The entire room stood. Philip was 72 years old, worth approximately $3 billion, and commanded respect just by breathing. He walked in with his lawyer, Bernadette Ingram, a woman with a reputation for destroying corporate malfeasance. Philip, Alan's voice was strangled. We weren't expecting you until this afternoon. Obviously. Philip's gaze swept the room, sharp and assessing. When Riley called me yesterday about ethical concerns regarding your firm, I thought it warranted immediate attention. My face must have shown my shock. I hadn't called Philip, but Zoe had asked for his number 3 days ago, said she wanted to reach out about something important. Apparently she'd taken matters into her own hands. There's been a misunderstanding, Alan started. Has there? Philip sat down without being invited. Bernadette remained standing, a silent threat, because Riley described some very troubling irregularities, including in the invoices your firm has been sending to Winter Manufacturing for the past 6 months. Jerry went pale. What irregularities? Bernadette opened her briefcase, pulled out a stack of papers. Billing for meetings that never occurred, expenses that don't match our records. Hours attributed to senior partners who, according to our logs, were never on site. She slid the papers across to Eleanor, who began reading with an expression that could have frozen nitrogen. These affect our account directly, Philip said, which makes them very much my business, particularly when the pattern suggests systematic fraud. We're addressing the situation, Alan said desperately. Drake Wilson is leaving the firm. With what consequences? Philip asked. A quiet resignation? Good references? Permission to do this somewhere else? Alan said nothing. Philip turned to me. Riley, you've shown more integrity in the last month than this entire leadership team has shown in years. Whatever happens here, my door is open to you. The meeting devolved from there. Bernadette outlined the legal implications of billing fraud. Eleanor confirmed that the evidence, combined with what I'd provided, suggested multiple securities violations. Jerry admitted that accounting had been flagging Drake's expenses for months but had been overruled by Alan. And then the real bombshell. Eleanor pulled out her phone and made a call. You can come up now. 2 men entered, showing identification. Federal investigators, Securities and Exchange Commission, and state financial regulators. Eleanor had contacted them a week ago, after my initial evidence dump, fulfilling her legal obligation to report suspected securities violations. Alan's face went from red to white. You did this behind my back? I followed the law, Eleanor said calmly. When presented with evidence of potential securities fraud, I have a legal duty to report it. My loyalty is to the law, not to protecting bad actors. The next 3 hours were brutal. The investigators asked questions, took statements, copied documents. Philip and Bernadette stayed the entire time, a silent testament to how serious this had become. When they finally left, taking all the evidence with them, Alan looked like he'd aged 10 years. You've destroyed this firm, he said to me. Drake destroyed it, Eleanor corrected. Riley just refused to let it continue. Alan left without another word. Jerry lingered, looking uncomfortable. What happens now? We cooperate with the investigation, Eleanor said. We conduct our own internal audit, and we hope we can salvage our reputation. She turned to me. You should take a few days off. This is going to get messy. But I didn't take time off. I came to work the next day and the day after that, managing the winter transition, proving that I could keep their business running smoothly despite the chaos. Philip called me directly, bypassing the firm entirely, and we worked together to ensure the acquisition stayed on track. 3 weeks later, Drake formally resigned. The press release cited pursuit of new opportunities. No mention of the investigation, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a carefully worded paragraph praising his contributions to the firm. I read it in my cubicle and felt rage so pure it made my hands shake. He was getting away with it. Again, just like he always did. That afternoon, a box arrived at my desk. Inside was a new security badge and a handwritten note from Eleanor. Temporary office on the 18th floor. New position, effective Monday. Discreet recommendation. I took the elevator up, half expecting some cramped interior office, a consolation prize to keep me quiet. Instead, I found myself in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The nameplate on the door read, Director of Client Relations, reporting to General Counsel. The note on the desk was longer this time. The board approved creation of this position. Your handling of the winter account under extraordinary circumstances demonstrated exactly the qualities we need. Some will say this is to buy your silence. Let them. You and I know the truth. Welcome to the leadership team. I stood at the window, looking out at the city spread below me, and felt something loosen in my chest. Not quite victory. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. My phone buzzed. LinkedIn notification. I glanced at it and froze. Drake Wilson had viewed my profile. Curiosity overrode caution. I opened LinkedIn and navigated to his page. New position, updated just hours ago. Senior Vice President, Executive Division, Crawford Financial. Crawford Financial, our biggest competitor. And Drake had been promoted, not punished. Senior Vice President. He'd landed on his feet, probably with a raise, and he was already climbing again. The rage came back, hotter than before. He was going to do this to someone else. Find another young professional to exploit, another career to destroy, another person to break. And there was nothing I could do about it. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Miss Bennett? This is Detective Sanderson, Financial Crimes Division. We've reviewed the evidence submitted in the Wilson case. We have some follow-up questions if you have time this week. The investigation wasn't over. It had just expanded beyond the walls of my firm. I met with Detective Sanderson and his partner 3 times over the next 2 weeks. They were interested in everything. Drake's expense reports going back 5 years, his relationships with clients, his personal finances. They asked about Emma, Liv, Zoe, the others. They asked about the pattern. We've been building a case against Drake Wilson for 8 months, Sanderson told me during our 3rd meeting. But we didn't have enough to move forward. The evidence you compiled, combined with testimony from his other victims, changes that calculation. 8 months? I stared at him. You've known about this for 8 months? We had suspicions, anomalies in financial filings, complaints that were dismissed too quickly. But Drake Wilson is connected, friends in high places. We needed an airtight case. What happens now? Sanderson exchanged a look with his partner. Now we dig deeper. Drake's pattern doesn't start at your firm. We're looking at his previous employers, his client relationships, his personal financial records. If what we suspect is true, this goes back at least a decade. I thought about all the people Drake had destroyed over 10 years, all the careers derailed, the dreams crushed, the lives upended. The scale of it was staggering. How long until you can move? I asked. These things take time. Financial crimes are complex, but we're getting close. 3 months later, I was in my new office, reviewing quarterly reports when my phone lit up with news alerts. All from different sources, all saying the same thing. Former executive arrested on multiple fraud charges. Financial crimes investigation nets senior VP. Drake Wilson faces decades in prison for systematic fraud. I clicked through to the full article, my heart pounding. Federal investigators had executed a warrant at Crawford Financial that morning. Drake had been arrested at his desk, walked out in handcuffs in front of his new colleagues. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement, extortion. A pattern of criminal behavior spanning 3 firms over 12 years. The evidence included testimony from 19 victims. 11 women and 8 men who'd been systematically exploited, threatened, and in some cases financially destroyed. The prosecution was seeking the maximum sentence. 30 years. My phone rang. Zoe, did you see? Her voice was shaking. I saw. We did it. We actually did it. I looked out my window at the city below, at the people moving through their lives, unaware that one predator had just been taken off the board. We did. The next few weeks were a media circus. The story had everything. Corporate corruption, powerful executive brought down, brave whistleblowers. My name was in the articles, though I refused all interview requests. So did the others. We'd fought for justice, not fame. Drake's lawyers tried to fight the charges, claimed he was being targeted, insisted this was all a misunderstanding, aggressive business tactics misinterpreted by vindictive former employees. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, recordings, testimony, email trails, bank statements showing exactly where the money had gone. 6 months after his arrest, Drake's lawyers approached the prosecution with a deal. Drake would plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation in a broader investigation. There were others, they said, people who'd helped him, people who'd looked the other way. People at the very top of our firm who'd known what was happening and done nothing. Alan Hayes' name was in that list. The day the news broke, I got a call from Eleanor. Turn on the news. I did. Watched Alan being led out of the building by federal agents. The CEO who'd protected Drake, who'd tried to silence me, who'd valued reputation over ethics. He was gone. The board is cleaning house, Eleanor said. Anyone who enabled this is being removed. They've asked me to serve as interim CEO. Congratulations, I said, meaning it. I'm going to need help rebuilding trust, both internally and with our clients. Would you be interested in a promotion? I smiled. Tell me more. The final piece fell into place 4 months later. Drake stood in federal court and pleaded guilty. Not to reduce charges, but to everything. His cooperation deal had fallen apart when investigators realized he was still lying, still trying to minimize his role. The judge sentenced him to 28 years in federal prison. I wasn't there, didn't want to be. But Zoe sent me a text afterward. It's over. He's done. I stood in my office, now on the 20th floor, with a title that made people take me seriously, and thought about the last year, about the fear and the rage and the desperate gamble that had somehow worked. The commission from the winter deal had finally come through after being held up during the investigation. It was more than I'd expected, accounting for the full value of the relationship. I split it with the legal fund Philip had established, the one helping whistleblowers who couldn't afford to fight back. My sister's medical bills were covered now. New insurance, better doctors. The emergency fund I'd depleted was rebuilt and growing, and every day, I came to work knowing I'd helped take down a predator who'd hurt too many people for too long. Drake sent me a letter from prison. I threw it away without reading it. The whole experience had taught me things I wished I hadn't needed to learn, that the system protects power until it absolutely can't anymore. That speaking up is terrifying and necessary, and sometimes the only option, that you're stronger than you think when you have no choice but to be strong. And that sometimes, just sometimes, the bad guys actually face consequences. I thought about who I'd been a year ago. The woman celebrating with champagne, naive enough to believe hard work and talent were enough. That version of me was gone, replaced by someone harder, more cautious, but also more certain of her own worth. On the anniversary of the night Drake had demanded his cut, I took myself out for champagne. Real champagne this time, not the cheap stuff from the office celebration. I sat alone in a nice restaurant and raised my glass to my reflection in the window. To surviving, I said quietly. And to making sure others survive too. The city lights glittered below, full of promise and danger in equal measure. Somewhere out there were other predators, other Drakes waiting to exploit whoever was vulnerable enough to target. But there were also survivors, people who'd found their courage and their voice. I'd become one of them, and I'd made damn sure Drake Wilson wouldn't create any more. The next morning, Philip Winters called with a proposition. He was expanding his business, needed someone to head up strategic partnerships. Someone with integrity and fire and the courage to do the right thing even when it was hard. I've built this company on values, he said. Trust, honesty, fair dealing. I need someone who shares those values, someone who proved they'll fight for them. I looked around my office, at the career I'd rebuilt from the ashes of Drake's attempt to destroy me, thought about Eleanor's offer of partnership, thought about the path ahead if I stayed. Tell me more, I said. Because that's the thing about surviving. You don't just endure. You rebuild, you grow. You take the lessons learned in fire and forge them into something stronger. Drake had tried to break me with his greed and his threats. Instead, he'd shown me exactly what I was capable of when pushed to the edge. I'd pushed back, and I'd won, not because I was special or uniquely brave, but because when the choice came down to surrender or fight, I'd chosen to fight, and I'd found allies who'd chosen the same thing. Together, we'd been strong enough to bring down someone who'd seemed untouchable. Real power, I'd learned, doesn't come from corner offices or executive titles. It comes from knowing your worth and refusing to accept anything less. It comes from standing up even when you're terrified. It comes from finding your voice when everyone expects silence. Drake Wilson taught me that. It's probably the only valuable thing he ever gave anyone. I picked up the phone to call Philip back, ready to hear about this new opportunity, ready for whatever came next. Because I'd survived the worst someone could throw at me, and I'd come out the other side stronger. The champagne celebration I'd missed that night in conference room A, I'd earned it now. Not for closing a deal, but for refusing to let someone steal what I'd worked for standing up, for fighting back, for winning.